recording is on. So we definitely have a quorum here, so I'm going to call the meeting to order at 8:04 on July 17th. This is the first meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group. And I have to read something here because this is a remote meeting. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Working Group will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Westborough website at town.westborough.ma.us. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so in the following manner: via Westborough TV, either on it will be posted on their website as well as their YouTube channel. Limited in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time by technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Just to note that due to scheduling conflicts, Westborough TV is unable to broadcast this meeting live or have someone present to record the meeting. So through the Google Meet service we're using, I'm recording the meeting and we'll provide it to them for posting. And we will provide a link to those recordings on our page on the town website. Also, we have a number of non-committee members, residents of Westborough, who are interested in seeing and possibly helping us out with our work as a working group. And so I did use my discretion as chair to provide them with a link to the meeting. I believe one of them, Leah it's McLean, right? Okay, so Leah McLean is joining us. And so just general guidelines for people who are guests of the meeting. If we're on a topic and you would like to contribute, indicate so, wave, or use the text chat feature. You need to wait to be recognized by the chair. And we'll go through with that. Sort of the model I want to use in running the meeting, since we're a working group and not so much a formal board or commission, is that of the Diversity Inclusion Committee that welcomes public participation and comment during portions of their meetings to get broader input and involvement in the process they're following. Someone was joining by phone. We'll wait for them to connect again and see where that puts us. So what I'd like to do start out today is first, I'm going to put up on the screen our agenda for the day. And I'll walk through it also for the public's benefit. Okay, so after the call to order, we'll go through welcome. This is, I'm not sure everyone knows each other yet, so we'll do a brief round of introductions. We'll then cover the goals and objectives of the committee. We'll have a discussion about the organization of ourselves as a working group. What our meeting schedule should be, how we're going to maintain minutes, and where we want to keep and share documents that we're working on until they're voted on and they're made public. I've left time to talk about and answer questions about municipal affordable housing trusts. Some of the background information that I shared with the working group members. And then at 9:10, we'll talk about sort of defining tasks and activities and next steps. I'm not sure at this point. We have other business. I have some questions for some future agenda items to see if folks would like those things to happen. And then the goal is to be out of here promptly at 9:30 so we can all get about our days and go to work on the things we've just decided to work on. So that's our agenda here today. And I'll go back live. Okay, so I guess what I'd like to do is just have each of us go around and introduce ourselves, who we are. So Jennifer just joined us, so welcome, Jennifer. If you can try unmuting, just so we know that you have audio. Oh, and video too. Cool.
There we go.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, and just for folks, when we're not speaking, if we can mute our microphones just to avoid background noise, or sometimes there's feedback on these types of meetings, that's really helpful as well. So, in no particular order of precedence, other than the order on my screen, which I realize is different for everyone, I'm going to go around and ask folks to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, what interested you in joining this working group, and we'll get to know each other a little bit. So, Ed, why don't you begin?
Okay, good morning. My name is Ed Bain. I've lived in Westborough for 40 years. I'm married, raised my 3 grown sons here. Educationally, my undergrad is in history and philosophy, and then graduate work at New York University School of Business and Finance and Statistics. Professionally, I spent 35 years developing financial information systems for Wall Street firms, mostly in investment banking, mergers and acquisitions, and wealth management. Some of the companies I worked for were ADP, Dow Jones and Company, as well as some privately held firms. And I'm now retired part-time. On the town side, I was on the finance committee for 5 years. Chair for 2. I was the chair of the very short-lived Charter Review Committee, along with Alan and Hank. With that, what interests me when Alan talked to me was obviously I've seen the difficulty so many people have, particularly the elderly, in finding affordable housing, either permanent and or rental housing, in Westborough, because of the lack of rental units and or affordable housing in our area in general. So anything I can do to help, solve that issue, I'm glad to. You're on mute, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Amy, you're up. There you go. So we know Amy has dogs.
I might want to pass for just 1 minute until one of them stops barking, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Amy. That's fine. Valeria, you are next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I've been living here in Westborough for almost 2 years. My background is I'm from Argentina. I'm a social worker. I've been working in the community for so long. I used to live in Somerville, and being as a social worker, working in the community for over 10 years, and give me a lot of opportunities to learn, help out with families being low income, evictions, and even I went to the court to help out. And like Ed say, it's really hard now in the population now with the elderly being so vulnerable, not finding housing. That's one of my roles and my job that I do. I work out for Commonwealth Care Alliance currently. And that is something important that make me feel strong in my knowledge to help out here in Westborough with elderlies. like I said, I had two kids. One is already just finished high school, and I have my son who is going to 5th grade. And like Amy, I have one dog. I have a husky. He drives me crazy. He's sleeping right now, which is good. Usually he's already up with me. I'm really happy I'll be selected to be part of the team, and looking forward to work with everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you. And welcome aboard, and welcome to Westborough. Amy, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. So I have 2 dogs, as you heard, only one of them. We have a golden retriever and a German shepherd, and anybody that walks by the house, they like to announce that. So I apologize in advance. I've lived in Westborough for about 3 years. Professionally, I am a realtor in town, so I see kind of both, people looking to move into town. I see the rental aspect. My business partner and I own income property in town, and trying to find that balance between affordable housing and letting landlords, do what they're supposed to, which is, capitalize on their investments. And there's such a great opportunity for investors to purchase in this town because rents are so high. And on the flip side, you have people that just can't simply afford it and therefore are kind of denied access to the educational system and just what a great community we have. So it's trying to find that balance. I have 2 kids. I have a son at the high school right now, and I have a daughter at Assabet. Yeah, that's really all I have. This is my first kind of committee of any sort involving any town. So it's like a totally new process for me. So that's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, and welcome. And to Elria and Amy, I think we'll do Jennifer next. First time on a town committee. Thank you for stepping up and volunteering. Next thing you know, you'll be pulling papers and running against me and all sorts of fun stuff. So just kidding. Well, maybe not. Okay, so Jennifer, why don't you go next?
Okay. Can you hear me now? I don't have my... Okay. Good morning. I'm Jennifer Giuliano, and like Amy, I'm also a realtor. I've been a realtor for, this is my 20th year, so I've seen a lot of good, bad, and ugly, to be very frank. And that includes people who are renting, who have been losing their homes for different reasons, obviously all the good reasons for moving, but one of that the very common theme comes up is about, what's affordable. And when people hear the term affordable housing, they have this stigma in their mind of what that means. And I really like to work actively to make sure that people don't think that affordable housing is a bad thing. It's actually a very, very good thing. And it's always curious to me as to where that theme came from. And I really like to overcome that and also help the obvious, the young people who are just starting out, the older people in particular who have worked all their lives and, now they downsize from their homes and they can't find something affordable and I don't want to say functional, but suitable, for them to live in, especially as they get older. I have helped on, I don't know if you say worked on is the correct term, but served on town committees before. I'm from Southborough. I lived in Southborough up until 6 years ago, and I'm here in Westborough now, obviously. But even then when I was in Southborough, I was on the personnel board for a couple of years. And from that, I had served as the chair of the public safety study committee at the time. So I am familiar with it. My family was very active in different things in Southborough. So I'm marginally familiar with it as well as, having that short stint there. So I really think, for me, I really want to say overcome the stigma and help people, find housing, find out what the needs are. And affordable housing for Westborough is relative speaking, whether it's housing or rentals, it's really a relative term, I think. And it's not just Westborough, it's all this whole area. So that's really I want to help people see what we need, see what needs to be done, and take it from there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hank, you're up.
Alan, I've lived in Westborough. Name is Hank Roush. I've lived in Westborough for about 43 years. Currently living over in Walker Meadow for the last 2 years in a over 55 housing complex. I'm a retiree, a fugitive from high-tech computer and semiconductor industry some time ago. I've been on the town finance committee for more than 5 years. I've lost track of exactly how long. I've been involved as both in affordable housing development and advocacy for the last 15 years or so as a volunteer with Habitat for Humanity in the local chapter. And I served on their board for 12 years, retired off the board last January after 12 years of service. I'm still an active volunteer with them. So my interest and knowledge of affordable housing issues really comes from spending a great deal of time advocating and developing affordable housing in Worcester County and Middlesex County.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, and we'll certainly tap that perspective and knowledge and expertise as we learn and go forward. I guess I should introduce myself. Alan Falcon Edinburgh. I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen. Have lived in town since 2002. Have a rising senior and a rising 8th grader in the school system who are also involved in other activities. As a point of reference as well, my wife Lisa Edinburgh is an elected member of the school committee and involved there as well. So my interest in taking on affordable housing and more broadly housing affordability really came out of my desire even to become a selectman in the first place and look at the overall affordability and quality of life in Westborough and how can we maintain and improve that affordability, which isn't just around, what's the tax rate and how much are people paying in property taxes, but who can afford to live here and really how do we enrich that aspect of the community. Knowing that, as Jennifer mentioned, affordable housing, when you say the term, a certain mindset often comes into play. People make assumptions about what that is. I think as we go through the work here, we'll see that it's actually a much broader, affordable housing is a much broader definition. We talk about housing affordability in general. I definitely, see the need in the community for affordable housing for senior citizens, retirees, residents who've lived their life here, want to be able to stay in town, as well as, young single people that, if they can afford to live here, they become a vibrant part of the local economy. But also, what term that's evolved in the last couple of years, workforce housing, making sure that, your firefighters and police officers and teachers and shop owners and have the ability to stay in town and not just work here, but, live here as well. And so, the goal here and really the motivation for creating this working group is we have, Westborough is a unique opportunity that there is money coming in that is earmarked for affordable housing, and having an affordable housing trust is probably the best way under state law to capture those dollars and hold them for the purpose of affordable housing and housing affordability. And so that's really where our charge will come here. Leah is a guest. She's a member of the public who wanted to sit in, who's offering to help and wants to learn more about it. So I would like her to do a brief introduction to herself. And just for the committee's, the working group's knowledge, one of the other guests who's unable to attend this week because he's traveling, John Gelchik, is a Westborough resident. He is on the Master Plan Advisory Committee, specifically on the housing subgroup, and is interested in helping liaison to make sure our efforts are made aware as they happen to the master plan, and can provide any feedback from that, from his subcommittee work back to us. He also professionally is the town planner for the town of Hopkinton. So he has some great domain knowledge when it comes to planning. But Leah, why don't you introduce yourself for a moment?
Sure. Hi. I'm Leah McLean. I live in town. I'm an insurance agent at Daniels Insurance. I've been here about 8 years. I'm a single mom, and I know all too well how challenging it is to stay in this town. Um, Recently, I actually crossed paths with Amy Dwyer, deciding whether I was going to stay in the condo that I'm about to buy or if, going to find apartments in town. And just trying to find apartments in town, my costs would go up $500, $700, maybe $800 a month. I mean, that's significant on a single income. So I see the importance of housing affordability in town, and I empathize with the people that want to be here, want to remain in this community, want to have their children to remain in the school system. And I'm on some boards now. On the Capital Expenditures Committee. I actually volunteer on Sustainable Westborough. I decided not to be a voting member yet because I wasn't sure whether I'd be buying this condo or not. So who knew where I was going to end up? And then on occasion, I do sit in on Westborough Youth and Family Service meetings as well. So I'm pretty active in the town. This is a perfect fit for me, volunteering for this. I know the struggle all too well. So that's me.
Okay, great, thank you. So I apologize that there's sometimes a delay with me muting and unmuting, as I'm trying to also take notes on a different screen here, so it's sort of getting the mouse back over to where it needs to be. So with the introductions out of the way, I want to transition sort of into our goals and objectives. So let me pull, I'll present that so the folks watching the recording of the meeting can see it as well. Okay, so in creating this working group, just a little bit of background. Back in January of this year, the Board of Selectmen held an affordable housing forum. So one of the, going back to the strategic plan that was done about 2 years ago, one of the suggestions in the strategic plan, one of the action items that the Board of Selectmen took away was ideally to have multiple meetings with the Board of Selectmen and all of the town department heads, and to invite other boards and committees where those meetings would cover a specific topic of a more strategic initiative or strategic nature, and help create the dialogue and build those relationships where those issues could be tackled. So back in January, my urging the board, and it wasn't even urging, my suggestion and willingness to do it, the board assembled the Affordable Housing Forum. If you took the time, I know Ed did, thank you. It's long. It ran longer than we anticipated. That was the first time we're aware of in modern town history where every stakeholder involved in affordable housing was in the room together. So in addition to the Board of Selectmen, we had the Housing Authority, the Affordable Housing Partnership Committee, all of the town departments, the Planning Board, as well as members of the community with an interest in affordable housing. And we brought in some outside expertise as well to really define what is affordable housing, provide information about Westborough and the current housing stock and our current demographics, at least at that point in time. And then here, what is the role of the Housing Partnership Committee? What does the Housing Authority do? Shelley Gearing from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership came in and did a presentation to introduce the concept of the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. And then we ended the meeting with a discussion, the outcome of which was the suggestion that the Board of Selectmen create a working group to pull together what's necessary to open, to create an affordable housing trust and bring that forth at special town meeting currently anticipated in October. So in doing that, the charge of us as a working group is from the Board of Selectmen is to create a structure for a Westborough Affordable Housing Trust to be presented at fall special town meeting, and to actively work to educate and engage the community on the issue of housing affordability in support of these efforts. Now with that, we'll have a couple of deliverables, some of which are very tangible towards a special town meeting in October. The first being the warrant article that, if voted in, would actually create the trust. And there's two components to that warrant article, and as we get further into the process, we can talk about both. We'll get into both components in probably gory detail. One is the town needs to accept the section of state statute as a bylaw that says we now have an affordable housing trust. And the second is actually having a declaration of trust that gets filed with the Registrar of Deeds and the Land Court within Massachusetts, that then gives the authority of the trust to actually hold funds and operate. And well, if you had a chance to review the section of Mass General Law that defines what a housing trust is and how it works, you'll notice that there's a lot there, and a lot of and not much oversight. So there'll be decisions with that deliverable about, given that the law allows us, as we create the Affordable Housing Trust, to set limits on what it can do or how it operates, to put in what we feel is appropriate provisions for oversight and governance by Westborough as a town. We'll have those discussions and come up with a recommendation for town meeting to vote on to do that. The second deliverable are warrant articles to provide initial funding for the trust. And here is some really good news. At our annual town meeting held on June 20th, the town did vote to create two stabilization funds. And the stabilization fund is effectively a place where a town can put money and hold it from year to year. So this money can come in as operating revenue for the town or through other sources, and the town can hold it in the stabilization fund so it doesn't fall to free cash. And what happens with town finances, and Hank knows this more than I do, being on the advisory FinCom, is that unspent operating budget on June 30th becomes free cash. It gets certified by the state. It's effectively a financial reserve at that point, and the town has fiscal policies on how and when that can be spent. So in order to preserve these monies that were coming in earmarked for affordable housing or other special purposes, the town voted to create stabilization funds so we can hold it. So in October, money in those stabilization funds could be available to us. Once the trust is created, the town could then vote to transfer money from those stabilization funds into the housing trust, so the housing trust could begin its work and have funding to do so. What money are we talking about? Right now, there are two sources. Well, one definitive source and one potential source of funding that could go to the housing trust. And I'm going to stop presenting so you can. So there are two sources or potential sources. The Pulte development at the State Hospital, Del Webb, Chauncey Lake. The initial mitigation plan for that project included a provision that the builder would either purchase land and construct a certain number of units of affordable housing elsewhere within Westborough, or when certain milestones were hit as far as construction, they would pay the town money in lieu of doing that construction work. That amount of money is $1.4 million. It comes in 3 payments over the life of the project. I think we're probably 1.5 to 2 years before seeing the first of those 3 payments. But that is money that is by the approved site plan and zoning for that project, can only ever be used for affordable housing. as everyone may be aware and the public's aware, the originally approved plan for that project for the 700 units included 70 units that would be earmarked for affordable housing for seniors. After the zoning, after the special permit was issued and the zoning was approved and ratified by the Attorney General, the town, the developer, and the Attorney General learned that DHCD had implemented a change in the way they were applying policy. In those units, they would never certify those units as part of our subsidized housing inventory or affordable housing stock. And so what I'm sort of proud of our town for is this is not the only development, either by Pulte or other developers in the Commonwealth, that got caught in this situation. It just so happens that Pulte has a similar development planned in Upton. And where Upton's response was to change the zoning and just to, take the age restrictions off, which would potentially allow students in, high school and younger students into the development, would affect the schools. Westborough chose not to do that and to negotiate with the developer. The end result of some pretty lengthy and intense negotiations is that Pulte is, as each building gets its occupancy permit, as a condition of getting the certificate of occupancy, actually, Pulte is going to make a payment to the town. This was done through a zoning board of appeals process. And so what this is considered inclusionary zoning dollars. It totals $9 million. Now, that's a lot of money. The wording of the zoning board of appeals gives some latitude in how the town can use that money, but we expect a significant portion of that money will go to affordable housing and can end up in the trust. One of the reasons the town created the stabilization funds at the June town meeting was that we've already received the first payment from Pulte, just roughly $642,000. And so that's now in a stabilization fund. And for October town meeting, under the second deliverable, the warrant articles for funding, we can look to see if the town will allocate some or all of that initial payment into the housing trust so we can begin our work. The other two deliverables are obviously a town meeting presentation, so that the town understands what the trust is going to be, what we are going to do, and our priorities. And as well as the last deliverable then is gaining town support for what we're doing, which involves educating the community, getting people involved, getting questions answered. And we'll talk a little bit about how we might do that as we move forward. In doing that, I'm actually going to put the slides back up for a second. I have some thoughts on approach. One of the things, particularly in the age of COVID, that make it hard to do to get town support. It's, we can't show up at the Rotary meeting. We can't go to the senior center for their Friday breakfasts. And my computer just decided to get very slow. Okay. Okay, I'm going to keep talking until my computer decides to catch up with me and let it present. If you end up not being able to hear or see me, let me know. Because my window's not responding. In any case, when I look at the approach, town meeting is rapidly approaching. I know October seems far away, and there is, given what happens with the timing of a state budget and our ability to finalize our budget, therefore, for the year, there is, I'm not expecting it, but it wouldn't surprise me if we had to delay town meeting until the town has the numbers they need to finish everything up. But in doing that, when you look at an October town meeting, the warrant has to be published publicly at least 2 weeks in advance, and before that, articles need to be voted onto the warrant by the Board of Selectmen. They need to be reviewed for comment and opinion by Advisory Finance Committee. And so effectively, the warrant components we would need to have wrapped up by the end of August, very early September, to get through that part of the process. At the same time, right now it's hard to have those in-person community meetings, so we need to look at other forms of community engagement. And I believe that part of the challenge we face is that, there are two aspects to this. There's one, what is the legal structure of the trust? Do we want to restrict anything that's allowed under state law? Do we want to add any governance? Is it 5 members, 7 members, 9 members? Can you vote someone off? What if someone resigns? All of those logistical issues as far as the legal structure and the governance of the trust. Then there's and it's probably the more important piece, is what's the trust going to do? If we want the community to support it, given that legally the trust can do many, many different things and can operate in many ways, and if you particularly
Guess we lost Alan. Well, Alan's gone. There is I don't know if you can see it. There's a document that might be helpful in guiding us. It's called the Municipal Affordable Housing Trusts. And it's basically a nice intro of how to gain community support, different media, obviously community meetings. We could do Westborough TV, we could do press releases, etc., to try to inform people. And it's not that long, probably 20 some pages. Yeah. That might be helpful as a good introduction to how to promote the working group and some of the ways we can announce and promote, our mission and some of the objectives we have. So it's just called the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. You can Google it. It's on, I think, the MH partnership website on the on the state websites. Alan, I was just talking about, while you were gone, this book here, the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, and it has some good information on how to promote affordable housing trust and some of the mechanisms. And it's only 20 pages. I think it's a good intro as we look to promote our
great.
what we want to do.
And I believe I have provided everyone links to that book, because that's the 2018 book.
This is 2013
or the 2015.
I have it as 2013. But
okay, so yeah, that's actually, they updated it. They didn't put the date on it. So those are both great. Those two documents I shared are definitely part of the resources.
Yeah,
from the Massachusetts Housing Partnership, which is a large nonprofit. If you go to mhp.net, you'll get a sense for what you do. I apologize to everyone. My computer decided enough's enough and had to exit and re-enter and reclaim my memory. So the Massachusetts Housing Partnership is another resource for us as we do our work. They are They are willing to help participate in meetings, provide expertise and guidance. They also have some resources that are that we can tap that are very useful. One of them is a resource called Data Town, where they collate census and other demographic and economic and social data. In a way, if you watched the January forum recording, you looked at the presentation, you saw a number of graphs and charts. That the source of the data was the MHP's Data Town and their public data and their public housing data projects. And they've actually recently even expanded that into some new areas and pulling in new data sets to have it. So they will help us gather some of the information we need to understand the current situation and the direction. The other resource that we have is the Mass Housing Partnership, because they promote the idea of towns creating municipal affordable housing trusts, have offered to provide us free access to an online tool called Co-Urbanize. Co-Urbanize is a system that allows us to post information, solicit public feedback, host online events, and facilitate online discussions as a way of improving community engagement. The team behind the Co-Urbanize platform do a lot. They specialize with municipal and nonprofits working on social issues like affordable housing. And so they also understand which techniques and which methods can help improve and expand citizen and resident engagement. And so it's normally a fee-based service. The Massachusetts Housing Partnership has offered to cover the cost of the tool for us. So it would cost our committee and our town nothing to use if we wanted to use it. And so when we get down to action items closer towards the end of the meeting, we'll talk about an action item for some of us to get a demonstration of the software and discuss how we might want to use it. Okay. So that's sort of the overview and the background of where we're going, and we're close to on schedule. I just got timestamp things here. So now I want to talk about, and I guess we can unmute, sort of an organization of ourselves as a working group. So a couple of logistical things we need to deal with. First is when and how frequently we want to meet. And so if COVID-19 has certainly thrown a disruption into things. Had we not been there, and it certainly took us a little longer to get the committee organized and to have the time and resources available to get this launched. So the original intent is this group would meet, monthly or more frequently as needed. Given that we're now mid-July and we have 6 to 8 weeks to accomplish things, I'm wondering if people would be okay meeting more frequently, possibly every other week.
Every other week would work. Anything more than that would get to be a challenge to get anything done in between. That's just my opinion. Hank Roush.
Okay, thank you, Hank. Any other thoughts on that?
I agree with him.
Okay, and Valeria says it worked for me too.
Yes.
Great. Does this time work for everyone?
Yes.
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 Okay, so we'll plan on meeting every other Friday morning at 8 a.m.
Okay.
Okay. The next issue is maintaining minutes. Okay. Oh, thank you, Ed, for sharing that. The link to the document on the text. I'm happy. I normally take notes in meetings. It's what I do. I'm happy also to go back and watch the recordings of the session and draft minutes. I don't know if there's anyone who likes taking minutes. I'm not seeing anyone with their head doing this. Everyone's doing this or this. So what I'm going to suggest for minutes is if there are any other note takers in the group who actively take notes while we're going through, just If you could send me your notes as well, I'll take your notes, my notes. I'll go through the recording and pull together minutes for everyone's review. Because of the sort of the condensed time frame and the speed at which we're going to work, and my belief that transparency is critical to successful government, my intent will be to have minutes available for everyone to review so that we can approve them at the next meeting and get them posted. And with the minutes, when we post the minutes, I will also attach on our page on the town website any documents that we talk about or that we've used in the meeting as well, so the public can see those as well. Speaking of which, for documents, I'm wondering if people have a preference on how we might share. As you know, we're doing Google Meets. It's part of a Google Apps account I have. I can put it in Google Drive and share that way. I can move things to Dropbox and share that way. I don't know what people are familiar or comfortable with.
Oh, fun.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think Google Drive is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then I'll probably work somewhat in the native Google formats, but for larger things, I don't know if people are comfortable with that. If not, I can show you how to download it as a Word document or another format to work in, or help you function. So if you have any questions in accessing documents or working with them, or switching formats or whatever, let me know. If we need to switch formats, I'm fine with that as well. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is municipal affordable housing trusts. I know the public might be at a little disadvantage because I did send some homework to the working group prior to the meeting and some things to read. I'm wondering if rather than me spending the next 15 minutes covering what they are and providing the definitions and things of that nature, I'll take just a few minutes to provide a high-level overview of what the trust is, and then if you've had a chance to look at any of the background information, just talk through any questions or ideas or thoughts you have about the trust or what it might look like for Westborough. So, a municipal affordable housing trust is a legal construct. It's an actual land trust. As such, there's what's known as a declaration of trust that defines the rules of how the trust, like any trust, is going to operate. Who are the trustees? How do they serve? What can they do? What can they not do? Under state law, under Massachusetts general law, we have the ability with the trust to provide oversight from the town. That's something that would have to be written into the declaration of trust. So, for example, looking at trusts in other communities, some simply accept state law, which says once the trustees are in place and the trust is established, the money goes into the trust. It's the trustees to use and spend. They can do anything allowed by law. Other communities want more oversight. So they'll say, the trust can do anything except they can't buy property without either a board of selectmen concurring or a vote at town meeting. And that's sort of the most restrictive oversight, is to require, any expenditure of money or any commitment on the part of the trust to go to town meeting. So you have, no oversight and ultimate oversight. And the challenge as we create the trust is going to be sort of to find the balance, right? I believe there should be some form, it's a personal belief, there be some form of oversight by the Board of Selectmen and town meeting, but that oversight can't get in the way of the trust being able to take advantage of opportunities that come that way. And the example I give in a nearby community, their housing trust can't, at the time, was not allowed to make any purchases without a vote at town meeting because the town felt it needed that level of oversight. There was an owner of an apartment building in town, I forget, like 10 or 15 units that had affordable units in it. He was approached by a developer who wanted to buy it and rehab it and probably end up converting it to condos. The owner had never thought about retiring, but got enticed by it and basically went to the Affordable Housing Trust and said, you know, hey, I've got affordable units. They've always worked out well. If you want this building for affordable housing, if you can match the offer from the developer, it's yours. I just need an answer before his offer expires in 10 days. So the trust met and they voted and they said they wanted to do it, but now they had to go to town meeting, and town meeting requires you post a warrant 14 days in advance. And so the logistics of the oversight made it impossible for them to execute on that opportunity. So there'll be a balance there. Now, someone asked a question. Let me pull up the chat window. Okay, so Hank is asking, do we have any idea which towns have successful housing trusts? Not all existing town trusts are equal in results. The answer is yes, we have some ideas. And what I'm going to suggest is that we do a couple of things in looking at trusts. One, Mass Housing Partnership has some housing trusts that they identify as best practice that have been successful in their operation and their ability to generate affordable housing. As Ed points out, there are about 100 towns with trusts. So a few years ago, the leadership in Westborough realized that when any department or board or committee or organization went to present before town meeting and compare their idea for what they want for Westborough with other towns, they would always pick towns that, of course, would make the idea look really good. And that differed on who you compared. We were not always comparing ourselves against the same community. So there was an effort called Data Dashboard. So Westborough has a standard set of towns that we use to benchmark as we're doing research or making decisions. And I'll share that list with the working group. It's on the website, but we'll put it on our part of the website as well for the public. So one of the things, and this will get into a task we have to do, is sort of look at, you know, which towns in our data dashboard have housing trusts, which don't. How are those housing trusts structured? What type of projects are they doing and how successful they've been? And as far as looking at what makes a successful affordable housing trust, if the working group is interested, I could see if for our next meeting, Shelley or someone from Mass House Partnership could come in and speak to us for 15 or 20 minutes about successful trusts and what they look like and how they operate. Would that be of interest?
Yeah.
Alan, it would help if I had a much better idea of what success looks like. You know, what are the metrics for Westborough for success before I try to understand, you know, what do we think will be successful if we have a housing trust, or when we have a housing trust, so that we have some basis for comparison. Okay,
so that's a great point. And I guess the question is, what do you feel would make us successful? By definition, a housing trusts are created, and there's the mission statement of a housing trust under Mass General Law is to create, maintain, and preserve affordable housing, which is a pretty broad mission. So I guess a discussion about what we would see as, you know, successful metrics. I think there are some that the town expects us to have, right? So we should be working to help the town maintain the threshold of affordable housing necessary to avoid Chapter 40B developments, right? To maintain what's currently a 10% threshold that says 10% of our at least 10% of our housing stock falls into affordability. I think as we move forward and we'll really have to decide on what our priorities are and on how we do that and what that looks like and how we'd measure success. We could certainly put up targets like we'd like X number of new senior affordable units in town by, within 5 years, right? We can be that specific, or we can be more general. I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on what our goals and what we would see as success.
Alan, we also need to clarify as to what we would consider affordable. Is our affordability threshold Section 8 kind of numbers, or is our affordability threshold DHCD kind of numbers, or some communities are using like 120% of AMI? I mean, you got to have some thresholds of what looks like affordable.
Okay, so we'll add that to the discussion. So, and just for context, with some of the terminology that Hank's using, is there are different definitions, as mentioned earlier, of affordable housing, and there are different programs at different levels of affordability. So, under state rules and rules of the Department of Housing and Community Development, or DHCD, affordable housing can be housing that is available to people with the average, the area mean income, right? So Westborough, we're in Worcester County, so Worcester County defines our area mean income, and that is, if you're single, what's the mean income of Southern Worcester County? If you're a family of 4, what's that mean income? And affordable housing is allocated depending on the project or the effort based on percentage, and that can be anywhere from 30% restricted to people who make 30% or less of area mean income, all the way up to about 130%, and it depends on the nature of the program.
Alan, there is a excuse me, a chart that the MHP puts out, which is, as of 2019, income limits for affordable units, and it does talk about 30% AMI, 50% AMI, et cetera. And they do break it down as far as what our area is considered. They break Worcester, I think there's Eastern Worcester County, which would no doubt be us, versus Western Worcester County. I think obviously the 495 corridor, which runs through a lot of, parts of Eastern Worcester, and we have, I think, a significant discrepancy in income levels between what you would see in Westborough, Southborough, even Marlborough, et cetera, versus what you would see out in Barry or Clinton or some of the western parts of the county. So that's one of the challenges is to what is our right AMI. One of the things that I have seen is that the AMI, we have in Westborough a significant difference between our median income and our average income, which illustrates that there's a significant, I don't want to use the word discrepancy, but obviously distribution between very high-end income houses versus low-end income. It really is a wide range. We're not homogeneous at all as far as income. So I think those are things that are critical in how we determine what's affordable.
Okay. Okay, great point. If you could do me a favor and send me that chart.
Sure.
Or a link to that specific chart, or a link to it, because there's so much information on their site, it will take me time to find it.
I have it.
Okay, and I guess part of what we should think about is, what efforts, do we want to restrict our efforts to, projects that would count as SHI, which tend to be a lower percentage of AMI per DHCD guidance, or do we want to also consider projects that might go up to 130% of AMI, which may not count towards our 40B thresholds, but would still be considered affordable housing and fall more into the workforce housing? And so I guess, I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts on that.
I think to get community support, you're going to have to at least establish that will at least make the 10% over the horizon. I mean, that's probably the primary goal that you need to get community support. then beyond that, you could say, well, maybe some percentage of the funding is used for things that don't count toward the inventory. But I would be surprised if people would be comfortable allowing you to spend 100% of the funding on things that don't count toward the inventory.
Okay, and do we feel we'll need to define what percentage would be towards qualified SHI versus non, or just set priorities that are, say our first priority is to help ensure the town maintains the 10% threshold. And as a side comment, personally, over the next several years, it would not surprise me if DHCD takes that 10% threshold and pushes to increase it, just given the statewide housing crisis and the difficulty in getting. Amy, why don't you chime in?
So I guess one of the things that I would want to look at is in terms of size and scope of a project and how that applies that 10%. So let's say somebody wants to build a 2-family house. How do you make 10% of that affordable housing when those numbers wouldn't work for a developer? But I mean, if it's a big project like Pulte, that 10% is understandable, but applying that to somebody who maybe just wants to build a 2-family house for them and their family member, however, you can't get that to count. But how do you balance that? So maybe identifying the size and scope of a potential development project, maybe being excluded from that. Does that make sense?
Amy, I believe the planning, our planning bylaws, our zoning bylaws indicate that any development of more than 3 units needs to have an affordable component in it. I think that's a recent bylaw. I don't remember if I got that exactly right, but
okay.
I think you're pretty close, Hank. It is it's the 5th unit in a development becomes affordable.
Okay.
And then at 10 units, you've got 2. So it's a technically, I believe the rule, and maybe it would be good to have Jim Robbins, our town planner, come in and say, here are the rules and that we currently have in place, as well as the other thing I was wondering if you'd be interested in hearing is what does the zoning look like in Westborough? Because affordable housing projects, we have a senior overlay district that's intended to make it easier in certain areas of town to produce 55 or 62 plus housing. But even as we move out into the residential areas, so if you look through Shelley's presentation about some of the projects that other housing trusts are done, in smaller communities, it's more common, for example, for the trust to buy a home at market rate, renovate it, and then convert it to affordable and sell it at affordable. And so the trust recovers a percentage of the money they've spent on the property, but has consumed some of its capital, and then would need to fundraise or get other sources of funds to do the next project. And so that's putting affordable housing out in the neighborhoods where property just happens to become available, where the trust is able to execute. Other trusts have done things like, convert a former hotel or motel into 50, 60, 70 units of senior housing, where there's an existing building, it's concentration, you've got the communal aspect to it that serves that population well. And so so right now, any residential development that hits 5 units triggers the affordable housing percentages. And then there's some additional components that I'm not familiar with in the senior overlay district, but we could see if Mr. Robbins is available to come in for 10, 15 minutes and do a quick presentation on the rules that we currently have in place, as well as the zoning.
I think our target is 20%, which would be the 1 out of 5, although the planning board has flexibility between 10 and 20% of when they're negotiating, significant development.
Right, and that negotiation comes into play when you need a site plan or special permit, or a special permit, whereas opposed to if it's if there's no permit required, then there's a set percentage. So if you for developers who buy 2 pieces of land that have or 3 pieces of land that 3 homes have 3 homes on it, and they want to create a subdivision and add 2 more homes,
Right.
having 5 or tear down those 3 homes and build 5, one of those 5 would need to be affordable. And there are even some affordable single-family home developments that are pretty recent. There's one off of Route 30, East Main Street, Zara Gardens or Zara Terrace, I believe,
Yes.
is an example of that.
Right across from Haskell Street.
Which
Yep.
one?
Zara Street. The developer was Zara.
Okay.
But that came in under a 40B. We were below our 10%, so they were able to come in. They still needed to build some, add to the SHI inventory, but they didn't. What happened was they didn't need to have lot zoning for normal residential development. So the houses very close together.
The houses are close together. They're on smaller than normal lot sizes. 20% of that development are affordable.
Right, and they just finished the last one, I think.
Yeah. So those have gone to lottery.
But Alan, I think it would be good if Jim could educate us on going forward what he expects how he expects the master plan and zoning proposals to support affordable housing and support the 10%. That would be good background.
Okay.
A lot of the difficulty getting affordable, I mean, it's almost impossible to build a 2-family home in Westborough, right? There's almost no place to do it, right? But we recently did put in auxiliary apartments being allowed or enabled in some areas. I don't know if those are considered affordable or not.
I'm not sure if those can be.
Again, Jim's probably the expert that maybe could.
Yep. Let's see if he can join us for our next meeting.
I can tell you personally, we had, my business partner and I had tried to do a development project, and we were like, okay, we'll put up a 3-family. And we were told no, because one of the units needed to be affordable. And again, it's how do you round up? And then it made it not affordable for us to do the project.
Right.
And it's this balance of, okay, well, if we did 5 units, but we can't do 5 units in this particular place. And then again, it's just making the numbers work.
Right. And there definitely is that balance issue. And my understanding is that there are significant area of towns where 2-family is allowed under the R1 zoning. But we'll get Jim in and he can talk about the zoning, what's allowed, what's not, the rules, and the overlay districts, and that add special rules and additional rules onto it. And then I don't think we'll worry about historical areas yet. And that layer of rules, there's no shortage of rules. Okay. Does anyone have? Well, it's very funny because my wise now 13-year-old, when he heard I was going to look at, take on affordable housing and housing affordability, goes, "Oh, good, you picked an easy one." That'll be simple, Dad. So I definitely appreciate that. Does anyone have any questions about affordable housing trusts? And
yeah, I do. First of all, I did give you that link to the income limits. It's on I posted the link, Alan.
Yep.
Okay. First of all, would this be a revocable or non-revocable trust? I assume revocable.
So it's neither. So
okay.
The affordable housing trust is created by town meeting.
Right.
It gets filed with the registrar of deeds.
Mm-hmm.
Is a land trust as well as I believe the land court. A trust can be dissolved, and there's some rules of dissolution that will be in the trust itself. Typically, that would require a significant vote. So having read about 14 different trusts so far, that could require, for example, a unanimous vote of the trustees themselves, followed by a majority vote of a board of selectmen and/or a two-thirds vote at town meeting.
Right.
So a trust can be, it's not revocable. It's not like a revocable trust, like a personal trust, where all you need is a declaration that you're revoking it and to file the papers. There would be a pretty involved process in dismantling it.
No, I understand. It's just with an irrevocable trust, where sometimes, like with OPEB, they suggest you do an irrevocable trust just to protect it from bankruptcy. It's just a minor thing. The other part would be, would you envision needing legal advice or guidance and/or somebody volunteering to really drive the creation of the trust, even given, let's say, Shelley's, here are the top best ones that I'm aware of?
So my plan of attack on this would be again, having looked at the declarations of trusts, the wording in most of the trusts actually is nearly verbatim to the wording about the trusts under Mass General Law.
Yep.
So the sections of the trust mirror the sections of the law, and they either include a section or exclude it.
And that's on the
right,
chapter the chapter 44 55C?
Yes.
Okay.
So my thought on this would be that we could probably draft the trust as far as using that template and cutting and pasting from other trusts. It would then, we have access to town council. And it would go to town council for the wordsmithing.
Okay.
And for legal compliance.
It can't go to town meeting without having been through town council.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll save us money if we give them a draft to start with rather than letting them start blank in the paper.
Yeah, and there is a the state has a template that says if you want a trust that's exactly as trusts are written in state law and you haven't modified it in any way, then this is what it looks like. And so the question then becomes, for example, by law, there has to be 5 members of the trust. 1 has to be a member of the Board of Selectmen. Some towns have 7-person trusts. Some towns say the trust needs to be 5 to 7 people, so that if people have to resign or there's a vacancy, the trust can still operate effectively. And then they'll say, if a vacancy of the 7 comes midterm for someone, the Board of Selectmen appoint, but they don't have to immediately appoint unless you don't have 5 people, right? Because as the trust moves forward, you're going to want people with certain domain expertise and knowledge involved as well. So you might want to hold the seat open so you can find someone with real estate or development or lending expertise, depending on the activities of the trust, and who you think might be helpful. So, but that's a great question. So my thought is that, we'll cut and paste a draft, and then town council, will do their magic. MHP can review the trust document as well and provide guidance on language and wording. They've done this dozens of times and helps communities do this.
Right. I think one of the key things that we would add to the trust or standard trust, and this was brought up in the presentation or the forum, and it was also a town meeting, was the fact that there would be oversight by obviously Board of Selectmen, but also more importantly by town meeting, that no monies would be spent. And that was a very open question of what we meant by money, monies being spent or projects being funded without approval of town meeting. And I think one of the issues is how do we phrase that? Because I would hate to have, if we needed to go out and spend $1,000 for some service, that we would need to go to town meeting. I think there's got to be some kind of laddered approach of who approves what, i.e. a certain amount the trust can approve, a certain amount maybe has to go to Board of Selectmen, and then another higher level might have to go to town meeting. Or certain actions like purchase, sale has to go through everybody regardless of price.
Right.
Some of those things I think need to be, especially selling it to town meeting, because when we were doing the stabilization fund, that was I don't want to say a sticky point, but it was something that we kept reiterating that, any withdrawals from the fund would come before town meeting.
Right. So with respect to town meeting, the stabilization fund is right. Money cannot exit those stabilization funds without going to town meeting. Once the town allocates money into the trust, from the town's perspective, the money's been spent. And it's the trustees, hence the name trustee, that the town entrusts to use the money wisely for the purpose of the housing trust. Having looked across a number of trusts, I'd say almost half have no oversight or only have certain things that need to go to the Board of Selectmen. Others will look at when do you go to town meeting, and typically it has to do either with the size of a project. So a project that is going to use 50% or 80% or more of trust assets is a threshold.
Yep.
Or it can be once the trust has, if a project is going to commit the trust to a cumulative level of its assets. So the trust may already have projects that tie up 50% of its assets, and they're going to do another project that's going to do 35 of the remaining half. That cumulative is now going to be 85%. Therefore, it would have to go to town meeting. Mm-hmm. The challenge, and I'll get to Hank in just a second, the challenge with having the town meeting oversight is the timing involved, right? And the ability of the trust to take advantage of market conditions and opportunities that come up, and even just being on the Board of Selectmen, and the town. The town meeting voted to authorize the acquisition of property along Belknap Street, for example, right? But part of that acquisition is the potential for a state grant to help fund it.
Right.
So even just managing the rules of the grant that says you need to be this far along in the process, but if you've gone too far, you can't get the money, right? And navigating that it makes things extremely complex and hard to do. So I think as we look at this, we should look at other trusts and see where they land, and think about what we think and what we believe and what we'd recommend to the town, so the town is comfortable that there is a level of oversight and fiscal accountability, but at the same time, not so much that the trust has its hands tied if an opportunity arises. I mean, it's really the situation if someone comes and says, "Hey, there was someone, the owner of the home passed away," and the kids come and say, "Hey, we don't live in the area, right? We don't want the hassle of cleaning it out and selling it. Does the trust want it? We got to know, right?" That's a process that should be weeks, not months. Mm-hmm. And so it's just one example. It may or may never happen. But Hank, you wanted to say something.
I mean, if we could identify 2 to 4 communities with trusts that we believe have been effective, then we can look at their trust documents and do a cut and paste pretty quick and get to the point where at least you can have an informed conversation about what's missing.
Okay, I think that's great, which
Yep.
is a great segue. Thank you, Hank, because that's an awesome segue to the next agenda item, because we're getting close to 9:30 and I do want us to be out on time. As a way of moving forward, I'd like to sort of divide our energy and time into 3 areas. One is governance, which would be what would the structure of the trust look like. The second would be operations, which is what type of trust do we want to be, what type of projects. As Ed pointed out, what are the priorities, what are our goals? And the third would be the community engagement. Informing the community what we're doing, getting their input on, and the community input can help guide what we see as our priorities and our goals for the trust as we establish it, and also feed into the type of projects we want to do. So as a first step for the governance side, I think it would be good, and I've got several gathered, to survey trusts across our data dashboard communities. And if you've looked in the 2 mass housing partnership documents that were shared, those are the trusts that MHP highlights as being successful. And in Shelley's presentation, her slide deck, she highlights successful trusts and specific projects they've done that would say they're successful. And look at those and say, okay, how are these trusts structured? What are the rules? What's the oversight? And sort of maybe even create a chart, a comparison chart, that we can say this is typical, or these are the ideas out there. Here's what we feel comfortable with. And then what items would we need to discuss as a group to make a decision on what we want the trust to look like, and what other information do we need? The second group would be on operations, to say what are our priorities. Part of that should be based on what are our needs. What's interesting is when communities go below the 10% threshold, they can actually protect themselves from 40B development by having a certified housing production plan, which is a roadmap of how you're going to create affordable housing. We don't have one because we're not below that 10% threshold, and we weren't below long enough to create one. But that's the type of information that would guide us on, what's the priority. So we say, okay, a priority is 62 plus senior housing for people who've lived, ideally for people who've lived in town and want to stay in town. How many of those do we need, right? And what's the second priority? Where are we with family housing? Where are we with, workforce housing and getting younger people into the community that, help the economic development and the vibrancy, but don't necessarily add children to the school? And where are we from a diversity standpoint as far as housing that makes our community welcoming to a broader diversity of people as well? So there's some data analysis work that needs to start happening there. And so that's a second bucket of work. And the third is community, which would be taking a look at the co-urbanized platform and starting to think about what do we want to ask the community, and what feedback do we want from the community to help guide us. So when we look at the data, and when we look at, and we start sharing that data, when we look at the feedback from the community, we can synthesize that to say, here are the goals of the trust, here are the priorities, here are the type of projects we're going to look for. And this is where the money would go. And as a second step after we sort of get these areas started, one of the things to consider is the trust can do certain types of activities that actually self-perpetuate the trust, such as the trust can do pre-development, pre-construction loans at low or no interest rates to developers to mitigate the cost of an affordable housing project and save them money on what's normally very high interest rate, loans to do the site planning and the permitting process. That money, because it comes back into the trust can then reuse that money again for other projects, right? Whereas other projects will consume capital. If we buy a home and flip it and sell it as affordable, the price difference between what we pay and what we receive and the cost of renovation is capital that is expended by the trust that we don't get back. So there are a number of options as well. So I guess I would ask for who would be interested in doing the governance, getting involved in governance over the next couple weeks between now and our next meeting. Who would be interested in the operation? What are we going to do? What does the data look like? And who would be interested in the community piece?
I'd be happy to work on the community.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do some of the operations, a lot of number crunching.
Alan, I'd be good to work on in governance.
That will be okay if I do also community.
But wait, hold on one second. Who was that, Valeria?
Yes.
Community? Okay,
Yes,
great.
and it said also community.
Hold on, I missed that. So Valeria and Jennifer on community, Ed on operations, Hank on governance. Steve evidently couldn't make it this morning. I'll reach out to him and see where he wants to help. I will help. Hank, I'll work with you on governance, and Ed, you and I can talk about the data and the operation side of things as well.
Great.
And what I'll do as a next step is I'll reach out to Mass House Partnership and the co-urbanization team about getting a demo. And so for Jennifer and Valeria, to get a sense of what that looks like, I'll come back with some dates and times where the vendors available, where the team's available to do that presentation for us, and then make it available to obviously anyone else can make that time. Would be great. Amy, I'm sorry I missed where you wanted to join in.
I would probably be better suited for the community portion of it as well.
Okay, excellent. So you are on the community team as well. Okay, excellent. So we are at the end of our time. So I'll say, quickly, is there any other business we need to cover today?
For next meeting, 2 weeks from today, same time?
Same time, 2 weeks from today. And I will see about someone from Mass Housing Partnership doing a brief presentation, and Jim Robbins as well. And then updates from the community, operations and governance teams. And if there's any anything that any of those teams needs discussed at the meeting, or there's information that can be presented so we can start making even decisions, we'll add those to the agenda as well.
Alan, just a quick note on open meeting law. Since we're going to start doing some work outside the meetings, we need to be careful that we don't deliberate. And one way to do that, one way to communicate but not deliberate, is if everybody, as they're doing work they want to share, feeds it to you, and then you feed it back out to the appropriate folks. So we're not deliberating, we're just sharing information. Good point. So with respect to open meeting law, so first of all, as far as the teams, because we're a committee of 7, the governance, operations, community task teams, if you will, can't have a quorum on them, right? So 3 is the max of us for any one team. And then if you have information to share, if you send it to me, I can post it for everyone as information, and identify if you identify items about that information that you want discussed, then we add that discussion to the next agenda, so that the deliberation, the discussions happen in the public forum. If there are any documents you need us to review, so ideally the sooner, if there are documents or things you need people to read or review to be prepared for a discussion, or we want people to have just before a meeting, the earlier we can get that into everyone's hands, the easier it is to give everyone time to do it. And get and be able to make time out of their busy personal lives and work schedules to do the reading, and do the prep work. So, good point.
Okay. Our first official vote. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, excellent. Start. Okay, so because we're remote, I need to do a roll call vote on the motion to adjourn. Mr. Bain,
Yes.
Ms. Moya,
Yes.
Mr. Rausch,
Yes.
Ms. Giuliano,
Yes.
Ms. Dwyer,
Yes.
Edinburgh, yes. So we are adjourned.